Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Patricia, and in this video I'm going to be talking about this book called Pachinko by Min-Jin Lee, which I just finished reading yesterday. I read this for the first time like about a year ago, but then I lost all of my books. If you want to know more about that, more in my previous video. But I finished rereading this yesterday. I rarely reread books. I almost never read books, especially something that's leaning towards the fiction side, especially as thick as this. So this is something. Like, I really love this, and I reread it because I got the book again. I wanted to have the book with me, like a physical copy with me, and I wanted to make this video too, and basically just share to all of you more in depth about the story and why I really love it. But before that, I would love to show off my Spirited Away cup, which I got in Japan. It's so cute because you can see like all the characters here, like Haku's over there. And I initially wanted to use this as like one of my pots for my succulents or something because I love plants. But for now, I'll just use this as a cup first until I get my own place. But I just wanted to share this with you. And I have green tea over here, so while talking about the book, you'll probably see me using this as I sip on my tea. So I'll be talking about why I love and I value this book so much. For those of you who've read it, you've probably known the story, and this will be more of like a discussion type of thing. Well, I'm going to be kind of analyzing the character development, the plot, and whatnot. So comment down below on what you think. For those of you who haven't read this before and thinking of reading it, maybe this video will give you that little nudge or little push to just read it right away because it's so amazing and I love it. I won't go through the exact whole story or whole plot about what happens to each character, but I will go through some events in detail, especially when talking about character development and things like that. So if you prefer not to watch this because you think that it's a sort of spoiler, go watch my other video. So let me take a sip of this tea and let's jump right in. So like I mentioned before, I just finished rereading this yesterday, and the second time I read it, it took me about 2.5 days to read it, and the first time I read it, it took me about like 5 days. So if you're worried about like not finishing this in like the quick amount of time, I would say that you'll be so engaged with the story and you feel you're involved in this character's life that it's not as thick as it seems. I think a lot of people are like intimidated by how thick the book is, but honestly, once you start reading it, it's not that bad. So the story started in the beginning of 1900, specifically 1910, where the Japanese took over Korea. And the first line of the story was, "History has failed us, but no matter." I think this is such a strong beginning line because when I first read it, I didn't really think a lot about it, but then I read it again and it actually hit me because the story is about an ordinary family, or Sunja's family, and she is one of those ordinary family who sacrificed a lot of her life just to try to build a better future for her children. And we don't hear history from families like hers a lot. A lot of history are rewritten by powerful people who like to tell the version of history. So I think this book, the last part of the sentence too, "but no matter," shows us how much resilience that ordinary families like Sunja's has gone through, and they are going to tell their version of history anyway. And I think that's such a strong sentence. So first, I want to talk about the character development in this book. I love how Min-Jin Lee just naturally transitioned from talking about one character to another, yet she still keeps us very engaged with the book. Like, we feel, or at least in my case, I feel like I was so involved in their life that I care about what each character is doing and who each character are interacting with. For example, like in the last part of the book, Mozazu's new girlfriend, I guess her name was Etsuko. I think we didn't know about Etsuko before, and like she just popped in Mozazu's life, but I felt when Min-Jin Lee was talking about her past, about being a mother, about her cheating and so on, I felt so involved in it, and I felt I could empathize with her and I could put myself in her position and learn from her perspective on how she views the world, and how as a Japanese herself she could hate Japanese. And I think that's just like a powerful thing. I never felt bored, or honestly there's no character that I hate in this book. Even though like in the beginning Min Jin Lee kind of portrayed Ko Han-soo, who is basically Noah's dad, she kind of portrayed him in a bad light, but towards the end of the book, I think we can sort of see where he's coming from. Like, he was neglected by his wife, and Han-soo actually really loved Sunja. And so even though I wanted to hate him, I couldn't hate him. Yeah, I think I just loved all the characters in this book. I also love how realistic this book feels while I'm reading it. Jin Lee took like 30 years to finish this book, and I think it shows, like when you read it, it shows how much research she had done. Even with like minor characters, like if you remember in the Biscuit Factory, Yosep's boss was a Japanese, and you can see even with his treatment towards Yosep, you could see how the Koreans were treated by Japanese in that era. And I think it also has to do with the fact that I related with the character, especially Solomon. I've never related to a character this much while reading any other book, but with Solomon I really relate to him, just basically because I grew up as a Chinese Indonesian, but also I am educated in the States and I'm here in the States now. I find that very similar with Solomon, because with she was telling us how he had identity crisis, how he didn't know like if he was more Korean or Japanese. And reflecting back, I just feel all this dilemma too. It was even mentioned that he went back to Korea, but it was just that like I don't think he felt any connection with Seoul or with Korea. Or like Solomon can't even speak Korean, but he's Korean. Like, I can't speak Chinese even though I'm Chinese. And this shines that dilemma. Like, the Japanese Koreans who are staying Japanese, if they come back home to Korea, they're seen as Japanese bastards, and if they stay in Japan, they're seen as dirty Koreans. So there's really no right way, or there's really no right place where they could call home and where they could be completely safe. Even with like Noah and Masasu, who are third generation Korean Japanese, they don't view their ethnicity the same way as their uncle or their dad or Sunja viewed their ethnicity as Korean. Like, even in the book, she said that Noah hated being Korean and he wanted everyone to know that he was Japanese, and that's what he did at the end. Like, he concealed his identity. Even his wives and children didn't know that he was Korean. But on the other hand, when you look at Uncle Joseph, he has this vibe that he's a proud Korean and he took pride in that, but we don't see that in Masasu and Noah. And I want to talk about Noah's character development in particular, because if you read this book, you know what happened to him at the end. But it's just so interesting, I think, to see how his character changed abruptly based on who he thinks his father is. So initially he didn't know that Han-soo was his father, so he's always felt that he had that connection with Isaac as his father. But once he found out that Ko Han-soo, who's the Yakuza, was his father, he felt that, oh, my blood's really dirty. Like, I cannot be a good citizen, or I cannot be a good person. I'm a bad person. I find that creepily similar to how like society labels us and how we bow down to it. Like, if someone tells us that, oh, you're lazy, then it kind of just like stops us from working hard. But if someone has that expectation that, oh, I think you can succeed in life, like, I feel you would push yourself further even more. And I just find that very interesting. The next thing I want to talk about is also the idea and expectations of women, how it shifted from the beginning of the story. Like, we see that Sunja, even as a young girl, like when she went to the market, everyone always told her that women should always suffer, like, you have to serve your husband and the destiny of women is suffering and so on. And like, after several decades, you see how characters like Yumi, like Phoebe, Etsuko, Hana, they all felt like, I want to work and I want to be in charge. Don't bow down again to that expectation of that women has to suffer. And they actually did pretty powerful things maybe for that era. Like Phoebe left Solomon and Yumi kept on studying English because she wanted to go to the stage. Like they have their own ambitions and they want to make their dreams a reality. And I think we can still see that kind of shift in women's expectations with all the feminist movement going on in the world and so on. And that's what I love about this book too. Like whatever we see here, although it's like before the 2000s era, you can still connect with those kind of like global shift in expectations and perspective or views towards gender and things like that, even today. So plot-wise, I like to compare between Sunja's marriage and Yang Jin's marriage. So Yang Jin's marriage was an arranged marriage with Huni, who's Sunja's dad. But I think what's interesting is that both of them fell in love with each other and they raised Sunja in a such loving household. And with Sunja, she was never expected to get an arranged marriage or anything like that. Like it was never mentioned in the book. But somehow her marriage with Isaac too felt arranged because it was kind of transactional too. She had to do it. And I loved how Min Jin Lee described Isaac's and Sunja's marriage because eventually both of them fell in love with each other. I love how Isaac's presence in this book kept on going even till the end, even though he passed away almost like in the first half of the story. I keep on feeling that he is still in the book because of his relationship with the characters. Like Mozazu and Noah kept on thinking about him too, like, oh yeah, like I had a dad who was a minister and so on. Isaac's believed like in Christianity. Sunja and Kyung-hee, they eventually go to the church and prayed because of him. And there's this one part of the book, I think it was when the family is now in the potato farm. There was this conversation between Mozazu and Noah when they were a bit younger. So Mozazu said, I'd rather have a truck like Hansu Ajosi. And Noah said, I'd rather be an educated man like Appa. He's talking about Isaac. And Mozazu said, not me. I want to make a lot of money. Then Alma and Aunt Kyung-hee wouldn't have to work anymore. And at that point, Noah didn't know that Hansu was actually his dad. So I think it's interesting how Noah wanted to be someone who's not his dad, which is Isaac, but Mozazu wanted to be someone that's not his dad, which is Ko Hansu. And I think at the end, which makes it even more interesting, is that Mozazu came out to be similar to Ko Hansu, even though he wasn't like a Yakuza or something like that, but everyone saw him as a dirty Korean because he's in the pachinko business and he makes a lot of money from it. But he did it. He did what he said he would do. He said he wanted to make a lot of money and Alma and Aunt Kyung-hee wouldn't have to work anymore. And the fact that he could buy his mom like this expensive purse, this treats, and he could even send Solomon, his son, to the States. And lastly, I want to talk about the title, which is Pachinko itself. So Pachinko is a Japanese pinnacle arcade type of game with pins, and you can pull the lever, and basically it's a gambling game, which is seen a lot in Japan. And it has like a bad connotation to it. Like the book mentioned too, people who own pachinko aren't really clean people, like they're dirty or they're associated with more negative things. So I think towards the end where Min Jin Lee talks about Mozazu and Noah, both of them ended up in a pachinko parlor or working for a pachinko. It just shows the reality that no matter how much you work, in the end, they end up at the same place, in a place where not a lot of people look up to. And I think what's so profound to me is that Noah and Mozazu had completely different characters. Like Noah as a kid, he was so hardworking, he even went to Waseda, which is like a top university in Japan, in Tokyo. And Mozazu was just like, he loves beating people around and he just made a lot of trouble. But at the end, both of them ended up in a pachinko parlor. And I'll leave that up to you, how you interpret that. But for me, it's like, it's so hard as a Korean in Japan at that time to not be associated with something negative when that's probably the only choice you have. I do really love the ending of the story though. I think it's like, I felt satisfied with it. This is like the first historical fiction I've read, and I think I'm going to read more because I love this so much. But the ending was like, you can kind of see the difference in the struggles of each generation of the same family, like how Sunja as a kid, like she would not think about education at all. Like definitely that wasn't an option for her, but with Musasu and Noah, like you can kind of see that it was an option for them. But also with Solomon, it's more like he's expected to do well because of his previous generation, like how much they've suffered for him. So Solomon, as a fourth generation, he could go to the States to study, and hopefully he could set up a better future for the next generation to come. But also I found it ironic how I don't think Solomon, he realizes how much suffering the previous generations had, like his grandmother or his great-grandmother. Like he doesn't know what they've gone through because the situation was different again at his time. And I think that just opened my mind, and I started wondering, how bad was it for previous generations of my family, myself? Like how much have they suffered so that I can be in this position? I just became very grateful for that because after reading this book. Yeah, so I think Min Jin Lee, she navigated us through the different characters in the story very well, that we have a lot of perspective from different generations, from different characters, that we're able to make this judgment. And that's why I love this book so much, because there's so much going on, but I don't feel overwhelmed by it. Like you can just see the different kinds of struggles and different kind of expectations that each generation of the same family faces. So I think overall this book shines that part of history that are often overlooked at. So to end this video, I want to read a line from the book, and it says, Mozazu believed that life was like this game, where the player could adjust the dials, yet also expect the uncertainty of factors he could not control. And I thought that was a great quote from the book, because it's what Pachinko literally is about, the arcade game, but it's also about what this book about, and it's probably what our life is about. So let that sink in for a bit. Obviously, I would recommend you to get this book from the bookstore and read it, because I think that a lot of people would be able to relate to the characters too, and to an extent. I was sad because Min Jin Lee, actually, I found out from my friend who is taking an Asian American history course that Min Jin Lee actually came to my school and did a book signing, but I missed it because I didn't know about her when she came. Yeah, but that made me kind of sad. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Check out my other video and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.